So this month in particular, you are going to see the Conservative leadership contest really start to heat up. Purely for the fact we are coming to a point where the whittling down of these MPs starts or is going to start on Wednesday. So we are going to see people drop out. We are going to see them, okay, go support this person, go support that person. But as I've said, the weird thing is, if you look how many current Conservative MPs have openly declared who they are going to back, it's something, again, at this moment in time, it might have increased, but the last time I checked, it was only like 45, 46 MPs that actually openly declared who they are going to back. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, whether that actually speeds up or we see more MPs start to declare. But so far, I think this sends a message. The Conservative MPs don't really know who they want to be their leader. I think that sends a huge, and should be sending huge shockwaves through the party, that you've got this many MPs that still haven't really openly declared or come out in the open. Like I say, that might change very soon. Who knows? That might change very, very quickly with the next couple of days, even the next couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. But remember, before the conference, they've got to get it down to the 4. And then after the conference, they've got to get it down to the 2. And that is where the big crunch point comes in. Because I've said it before, if Kemi Badenoch makes it to the final 2, it's her contest to win. She wins it. She walks it. Because the membership wants Badenoch. Just like the very first leadership contest where you had that Truss versus Rishi Sunak, all the MPs really wanted Rishi Sunak. Like, they wanted Rishi Sunak, but they put Truss in because she came second and they thought she would never win it. However, they underestimated how popular she was with the membership, and she walked that part of the contest easily. Hence why at the next one, where Boris Johnson was threatening to come back, all the MPs quickly gathered round Rishi Sunak to install him, because they knew that if it went to a contest to the membership would vote back in Boris Johnson. And they were like, right, we can't have that because we know that would be political suicide. The membership didn't care because they wanted Boris. But the MP said, nope, we are giving you Rishi Sunak, and that will be the end of the conversation. And as a result, there has been a lot of disapproval and detachment between the Westminster Party and the rest of the non-parliamentary party. Very, very much so. But oh boy, we'll see who makes it to the final 4, and then who, of course, out of them will make it to the final 2. I've already told you in past videos who I think will get there, but this, I think, will be very interesting. We talked about Badenoch's cribbing of Project 2025 to make it Renewal 2025. It's not just Kemi Badenoch, of course, taking money from the Heritage Foundation, but Robert Jerrick as well, taking money from them too. So we should be worried that even if Badenoch somehow loses or gets knocked out, we might very well see Renewal 2030 brought back in at some point. And also, as I've pointed out as well, it is very likely before the next general election, there will be 2, maybe even 3 Tory leadership contests in the offing. So, not all is going to be, shall we say, quiet in the state of Denmark. I think, I don't know, what was that? Was that Shakespeare? Yeah. I can't remember now, but yeah, something about Denmark and Shakespeare, whatever. But yeah, today we're going to have a look at what was the Conservative response to Kemi Badenoch's speech, because I think this is kind of important that you have a look and see what they think about this. So we're going to go over to Conservative Home and have a look what Will Atkinson not only thought of Kemi Badenoch's speech, but what he has heard other Tory MPs think about Badenoch's speech and how that might have been interpreted by the rest of the party. So Before we begin today and carry on, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as well, there's the Pony Club down below too. So let's crack on then into this from Conservative at Home. The title is Badenoch's Greatest Challenge, the Desire of Tory MPs for a Quiet Life. So Alan Yea's back from her holidays. Kemi Badenoch, shall we say? Let's get it right, because again, I know I've been pronouncing it wrong, but I've heard it pronounced the other way as well. So hopefully I'm getting it right now. Yesterday launched her leadership campaign. Rival camps also now hoping at least the former frontrunner would trip up and be a tad disappointed. Introduced by Frances Maud and Claire Cathero, Badenoch now proved that she was reassured her statement of her principles, saying that it's time for something completely different. She promised, but nothing Python-esque followed. And I watched that yesterday. My taking away from it was Badenoch came across as completely and absolutely weird, with some very weird statements she made and weird things that she's obsessed about, namely being the culture wars, which we'll get into in a moment. But then the other thing was, what was she offering that was different? Bear in mind, not one of the nominees are talking about what was, or at least what is maybe current Tory policy, what they want to implement, and maybe what they would change. They've all talked about, how we need to change, but change what? It seems that your policy offering, especially at the last election, was massively rejected, and that people have had enough of it. So what change is Kemi Badenoch going to bring? That does not seem to have been discussed yet at the moment. And I'm kind of shocked that there is a very a very shallow, to point of nothing, of talking about policy. That kind of shocks me a lot. And that even many of these conservative commentators aren't even talking about that there's this lack of talk about policy, which, considering if they are going to be the leader, they are going to set the direction of what the Conservative Party should be doing, kind of something important they should be talking about. But there you go. So we'll continue. So standing against the backdrop now of the Institute of Engineering Technology, a step up from the drab office, which she had now launched her bid just over 2 years ago, Badenoch now pitched that her experience as a systems engineer equipped her to rewire both the Tories and the British state, saying, "Getting my engineering degree was much more difficult than running for leadership," she joked. Providing that more than one candidate knows a little Keith Joseph, Badenoch then declared our party's principles, saying the principles of the British people, the principles not of the centre ground, but not of the common ground, rather than be about our beliefs, personal responsibility, citizenship, equality under the law, family, and truth. We need to be confident Conservatives again. But what does that mean from a policy point of view? Again, nice words, but what does that actually mean in policy details? So, too often, she says, the last government talked about the right but governed left. It's a very familiar charge about the 14 years that combined tax burdens, now at its highest since Clement Attlee, as net migration then climbed to 4.5 million, all whilst now legislating for no-fault divorce and net zero by 2050. Still, good news about the plastic straws. Was the Sturm and Dag of getting Brexit done actually worth it? Fair point and fair questions. And to be honest, these are what the questions should be asking. These are what people should be asking of these leadership candidates, like asking them these tough questions. Like, this is your 14 years of record. Doesn't matter that you've come in, you've still got to answer these questions. And remember, when Starmer took over, he had to answer for a lot of the years of when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge. Any leader who takes over has to answer about their past leaders, the past stuff that they did. So All this stuff, they still have to answer questions about. They do not answer that question. Getting Brexit done, was it worth it? An interesting question you won't see any of those leadership candidates actually tackle. So Badenoch had various explanations as to why we fail to now uphold the principles. Already, for the Sunday Times, she has now pinned the blame on the political system, bequeathed to us by Tony Blair. What Peter Franklin calls now the endless rounds of consultations, public inquiries, judicial activism, interfering quangos, and of course the legally binding policy frameworks that frustrate ministerial action. I love it. The endless round of consultations. You don't have endless rounds of consultations. You have a public consultation, and then you see what happens, of course, from those. Public inquiries. Why are public inquiries a bad thing? I think public inquiries are very good. Judicial activism. They can't actually point out to any times that has, again, supposedly happened. But they'll go, oh, no, you don't understand. It's lefties using the law against us. And most of the time, they can't really, what should we say, afraid to bring up the cases of these lefties who brought up these cases, because many times they are discrimination cases and things like that. And I don't want to get into the details about those, which is again kind of funny. The interfering quangos, again, that is all about sort of sort of SPADs, special advisors, bringing in sort of the sort of the corporate world in many times into the government. Bear in mind, the last Conservative government for 14 years also engaged with a lot of these quangos and even made and bought them in themselves. So, yeah. And then I love it. The legally binding policy frameworks. Well, that's the law. You should have to follow the law. But if you want to undo that law, then you have to put exactly what it is you're going to do. Are you going to get rid of it completely? Are you going to change it? There was nothing actually stopping them from doing a lot of this stuff. But the problem is that they have constantly found, hence why they always go back blaming Tony Blair. A lot of the stuff that Tony Blair did, of those legally binding policy frameworks, like the Human Rights Act, universally popular. And undoing it, going to be quite difficult. Anyway, she continues, or at least will continue. So, unlike Liz Truss, now self-explanatory enthusiasm for the deep state, Badenoch now seems a thicket in the thicket of forests of inertia that engineering experience could now hack through, saying that for too long, politics has been the triumph of words over deeds. A statement of which few would disagree. We are powerless to watch Labour's 5 years of failure, all because we couldn't match our promises to action. I already love it that they're already declaring these next 5 years are going to be a failure. When we can look back at what was essentially 14 years of abject failure by the Conservatives. Labour have barely really even started yet. Technically, even though, we've had the recess and extra, they've really only had at this point, 3 and 2 days in power, technically. Again, hardly a failure. But when you ask these people, exactly what has Labour failed in, it will be very, very abstract. So, anyway, Will continues. As was the case now 2 years ago, Badenoch now appeals because she shares the central frustration as our members. Why haven't 14 years of Conservative government made Britain a more conservative country? Because the country is fundamentally changing. The country has fundamentally changed. Conservatives have not changed with it. You saw recently when you looked at sort of how country they're changing, it's changing from a very social conservative country to a lot more progressively liberal one. Even more so than quicker and faster than the rest of Europe. That is constantly changing, and the Conservatives have not changed it. That it's insane of this idea that why haven't the Conservatives changed society as a whole to make the country more conservative? Well, we've had 14 years of conservative rule. That's changed a lot of people's minds against Conservatives. You've seen people, what used to happen, people used to get, as they got older, they got more conservative. That hasn't happened, meaning that their voter base, their now core voter base of well, old people, has shrunken significantly. And we've talked about that in the past as well. So Badenoch obviously offers a diagnosis of why, and of course the self-confidence to suggest as to why she knows she can save the country and no one else can in the grand spirit of the lady. Yeah, and I wouldn't say what she is suggesting is universally popular either. Once again, parties, once they lose, they tend to elect leaders who are more popular with the membership, not the wider voter base. So Badenoch is obviously cushioned by an air of inevitability. Coutinho, Chris Phillips, and of course Laura Trott all rowing in behind her is the very natural bandwagon of the presumptive victor attracts. Both of our surveys and even YouGov have her well in front, even if Jerrick does lead with the MPs. One, of course, wants now a plushy job under the regime. Declaring now ahead of tomorrow's first round of voting does seem wise. Like I say, we'll see what happens when we come on to Wednesday with their first round of voting when this comes in. Yeah, even if her now latest Commons appearance to oppose Angela Rayner confirms the Shadow Housing Secretary has returned from her holidays now very much invigorated, one or even two questions do remain about her bid. Whilst Badenoch may be theorising as to where and why previous governments went wrong, she has yet to actually establish what she would do differently. What have I just been saying in the beginning of this? She's very studiously now avoiding discussing policy. And it's not just her, Will, all of them are. And I love the fact Will brings this up for her, but not anyone else. She promises a policy review after the election. And with the contest now extended timetable, perhaps this will offer an opportunity for nerves to cool. And of course, a more enlightened discussions from all sides. Or perhaps it will now let her rivals get ahead of her with a very tick list of member-friendly ideas. Cleverly, according to that, played hostage to Rwanda and now increased defense spending at his launch. Whilst Badenoch may have now picked up a few rising stars just as she lost the support of Neil O'Brien to Robert Jerrick. Again, that was a massive blow to Kemi Badenoch because Neil O'Brien had a lot of support behind him. He's a very popular MP on the right, had a lot of pull within the party. So losing him to Robert Jerrick is a big blow to her. But anyway, back to this. Unlike Badenoch, both can now come straight out after the election with an analysis of the defeat based not only on the usual laments about bureaucracy, judicial activism, and of collective passion for scandal, but also now to focus on central and concrete policy failures. Would Badenoch actually raise living standards, reduce the NHS waiting lists, and grip the legal and on illegal immigration? We know on the latter, she has absolutely no enthusiasm for arbitrary targets or even planning to leave the European Court of Human Rights. Is this now refusing to make promises you're not sure you can keep now wiser than making none? What would that policy review actually look like? And will that be tackling those forces of inertia look like? And that's what I've said since day one, not only covering Kemi Badenoch, all these people, very, very few are talking about policy. Even though, again, I do agree, Cleverly came out and said, oh, we should do this and this, but that was hardly anything different. That was still very much singing from the current Conservative hymn sheet. So there's not a real discussion about that. Or even though Cleverly talks about how we need to change or now to become more conservative, what he talked about in his policies is exactly what the previous Conservative administrations have offered. How does that and those policies make them more conservative again? Anyway, if there is one, of course, quality for which Badenoch is now famous, it is that never shying away from a fight. Few can actually forget her most significant contribution to the election campaign, taking to task on Twitter a prominent rich lefty white male celebrity, David Tennant, after the erstwhile Time Lord had claimed that she just wanted her to shut up and not exist at the British LGBT Awards. Many would find Tennant rude and, of course, defend Badenoch's right to respond. but her choice of language was odd. It wasn't just odd, it was weird, honestly, especially for a woman who has never claimed to be the biggest fan of identity politics. And it was even odder was for her to make this dispute very central to a video that launched her leadership. She says the party needs someone who is not afraid of Doctor Who. I will tell you this now. That spat is, if she becomes leader, those are going to be the norm. I'll tell you what, Conservative MPs are going to get tired of that very, very quickly. I had been hitherto unaware, of course, that this was a very quality that Tory leaders actually required. I can't claim to know what Margaret Thatcher's stance on Tom Baker was, or what Alec Douglas made of William Hartnell, but I can see that Badenoch's relish for a back and forth with one of television's most popular actors will now worry those many Tory MPs hungry for a quiet life in opposition. And that is true. Many of them do want a quiet life. One of the big things that we have seen, I talked about, you're going to get things from people who more often than are right about the Tory party saying what was wrong with them. We've covered some of those. One of the big things that they were saying was, we need to shut up and go away because people don't want to hear from us at the moment. We need to shut up, go away, and sort ourselves out. Then we can sort of come back again. And if you get into that, straight away with Badenoch won't shut up. She'll be out there constantly picking fights, all this stuff. And like I say, her entire presentation came across as completely and absolutely weird. And he's going to mention, of course, in a moment, Breaking Blue. The party has a big image problem. How do you sort that out? You can't with someone like Kemi Badenoch in place. So back to this. Badenoch, though, has already been blocked from reaching the final two. And thus, the members, if many MPs presume that if she gets to the latter, she will win, and that is now a prosperity that they dislike. They will try their hardest to try and block her again, and they want to focus on Labour's failings, not on rebutting every criticism that their leader and their opinionated celebrity might air. I don't really believe she has been blocked. I do not believe that she has been blocked from reaching the final two. I think she has more than enough good chance of making it to the final two. And at that point, like I say, it'll be hers to win. And remember, Kemi Badenoch can come out and say, I should have won, and cause a lot of trouble for her next, whoever leader it happens to be, by saying, I should have won this contest. I was blocked by Tory MPs. The MPs are not letting me win. I am who the party wants. She could cause a lot of trouble. And trust me, as we have seen in the past by many of the Tory leadership past contenders, there is a massive, massive problem with them being very, very sore losers. This is why I've said, doesn't matter who wins. This Tory civil war, the Tory infighting will continue. And oh boy, Badenoch will be there for it, because she knows if she can tear down the leader, then guess what? She can cause another contest and she can come back and maybe even win it. Because there are a lot of people, if you read the comments yesterday, saying that Badenoch was really taking the opportunity to try and grab a lot of power by becoming the leader of the opposition. And that is something that has been also talked about, that she grabbed power in the past by really cozying up to Michael Gove. And there's also talks about how much Michael Gove might be in the background trying to puppet master it. So there is a lot of interesting stuff going on in the background, but I think a lot of this stuff and how this contest, I think, goes out will ultimately, as it always does, come out after. But we'll see what happens. So back to this then. So nobody doubts that, of course, our party does have an image problem. Breaking Blue Onwards post-election survey found us to be perceived as extremely weak, dishonest, incompetent, and wholly out of touch. If voters believe that we are weird, self-indulgent, and obsessed with picking pointless fights at their expense, with a Barney with Doctor Who could actually change that. Who doesn't want to win over? Who does it actually want to win over to Badenoch's side? And that is so fun that this is now actually happening. Voters believe we are now weird, self-indulgent, and obsessed with picking pointless fights. That, according to a survey that came out today, is already happening. The whole weird allegation is starting to come over from America, something we should absolutely be encouraging Labour to support. And I am hoping we will get a Labour MP who stands up in the House of Commons and calls like the Conservatives weird if they do go after like this, something like this. It would be fantastic to see. So let's finish this off. So what MPs wants from her is not a culture warrior, but a quiet and very purposeful engineer. But that's not to say that these issues don't matter, or that Badenoch doesn't deserve credit for seeing the cast review across the line. But the best approach to them is that one reflects an even more methodical side, the slow, the steady, the overwhelming accumulation of evidence. Yesterday, Badenoch claimed that the one person cannot solve the problems of the future, but she calls her leadership bid Renewal 2030 because she wants to be more than just about herself. And for that to be borne out, Badenoch must actually learn, like Margaret Thatcher, to love a few personal attacks as proof that she is doing something right. This is an ambition that the party can unite around. I am very much in the stance Badenoch has a very good chance of winning this. I don't really believe Will, or he's being very coy, or he knows something that she is being. Because I'm not going to lie, if someone to come out here and say Badenoch has been blocked, that she won't get to the final two. Like Badenoch has already been blocked from reaching the final two. It's very interesting if we actually I ought to have asked that. Like, why do you think that? Who's told you that? What's been said? You know, because I do think she has a very good chance of reaching the final two. She's definitely going to be in the final four. Whether she makes it to the final two, I don't know. But that's the point where you might see MPs generally go and try and block her. But at that point, if I were Badenoch and I would start seeing that happen, I would start calling that out. I would start appealing to the membership at that point. Go beyond your MPs' heads and start appealing directly to the membership at that point. I think that has to be her target. If she's to win and she gets to the final four and she sees that she is being blocked from reaching the final two, at that point she can just appeal to the membership. So we'll see what happens on that front. But it'll be interesting to see what she does on this. Let's have a look at the comments. So first one, she really does say all the right things. Really want to vote for her, but strongly suspect that she's just another a Doug Smith plant. Being introduced by Francis Maud simply now strengthens my fear. Again, her being introduced by a couple of very influential people from the Tory party and within the Tory party is kind of says that she's got a lot of backing behind her in that. So this is something else. Yeah, I'm very curiously depressed about the thought of Badenoch as the Conservative leader. So does she has any good skills for leader of the opposition? This is now my lingering doubt. I think so, but I don't think she has a very unifying character. She's more challenging than that, and I don't think the Conservatives have any future if they aren't more united. That's been the biggest problem. There's nothing that is going to be uniting them on this. Really not anything uniting them on that. This is interesting. So someone who seems to now struggle with alternative viewpoints isn't a leader. As I understand it, I'm very pleased that she's taken her ECHR rubbish off the table, but I am a bit concerned that she thinks growing up in a military dictatorship where billions are now siphoned offshore to the bank accounts of generals was socialist. It seems a very disconnected from reality. Yeah, she will provide entertainment at PMQs for the pensioners now with the combative eye-gouging attacks. If Starmer now presides over 14 years of a failed government and she has no part of that of that failure in the party, she will face the Speaker's wrath, just as she did before. She believes that she is a business sec, aside now from calling all the demands of Modi to try and get the trade deal, which Sunak blocked, alarmed, of course, of that. It's interesting to see what they are saying about Badenoch, but I still think she's a good chance to be a leader. I really do. I think the real contest in the final four, I think if it does get to the final four, I think it's going to be between Badenoch and Jerrick. And that's where I see, as I said before, that's where I see a lot of the explosiveness start coming off, because as soon as you get to the final four, now you've got to start differentiating yourself. You've really got to start winning over those more MPs. Remember, at this moment, we haven't had a lot of MPs declare. Unless that changes in the next couple of days, I don't see that happening. Maybe it happens at conference. Maybe they all decide to start declaring at conference. Maybe on Wednesday we start to see them all coming out and declaring, who's who and who wants who. We'll have to see what happens, but it's going to be an interesting time in the next, I think, couple of weeks as we see the first vote. We'll see who falls out. I think Mel Stride is going to be the first one out, to be honest. Maybe Priti Patel, by the looks of it. Like I say, both she and Mel Stride are struggling, phenomenally so. And at that point, I think Patel would probably row in behind maybe someone like Kemi Badenoch, giving her support on that. I don't think she will back Robert Jerrick. Again, those two have a history. They don't really like each other very much. So she's probably going to back Badenoch, which will get her MPs over to Badenoch's side. That will give her a bit of a boost. Mel Stride will probably go to, I think, someone like Tom Tugendhat. He's the really only centrist there. I think they are a more aligned. So I think that's where his support will end up going. And like I say, I think the final four is going to be Robert Jerrick, not Priti Patel. It's Robert Jerrick, Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, and then maybe it's who is the fourth one. I think it might be James Cleverly sneaking in. And I think that'll be your final four. And then it's a fight who can get the most out of those two to then go forward. And as we've said, once it gets there, I can guarantee you this now, the membership is not going to pick the one that the MPs want, because the membership wants a real headbanger. And depending whoever that second person is, who knows? But I'll tell you this now: if Badenoch makes it to the final two, she will win. She will win hands down. It is a fool's bet to bet against her in that final two, because the membership wants her badly. So, as always, before we do continue, as always, before we finish, thank you very much for watching. And of course, do remember to like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, we'll see you all next time.